13% of all people aged 45 and older in Alaska have some type of subjective cognitive decline. These statistics make clear how important it is for all Alaskans to educate themselves on issues and challenges facing our caregivers and elders. Normally, the Caregiver Education Series is held at the Juneau Library. However, due to COVID, we have adapted to an online format. A benefit to hosting the education series online is the opportunity for all Southeast Alaskans to attend. So, to everyone attending from Ketchikan to Skagway, I would like to extend a special welcome. For the next 3 Wednesdays, you will have the opportunity to hear from experts whose careers have been devoted to helping and caring for our most precious population, our elders. These experts will address the issues and challenges facing elders and caregivers in Southeast Alaska. Before I introduce today's featured speaker, I would like to know how many of you watching have heard of the Senior and Caregiver Resource Center. So Aaron, if you would go ahead and launch the poll. The topic of today's webinar is a loving approach to dementia care. With us today is Laura Wayman, author of the best-selling book, A Loving Approach to Dementia Care. Laura has been referred to as the Dementia Whisperer. What this means is Laura's approach to dementia is not to try to change, stop, or fix the person suffering from dementia, but rather to listen and change the way we as caregivers respond to the person who is suffering. So with that, I would like to introduce Laura Wayman.
Thank you, Denny.
Hi.
Good to see you. We got to spend a little time yesterday on the radio. So thanks for all you do, and thanks for such a wonderful introduction. So I am ready to get going here. Let me share my screen so that I can raise dementia awareness. Okay, I need to be enabled to share the screen. It looks like I am disabled at this point. So whatever we need to do.
Erin will do her magic behind the scenes. Just hang on a minute.
Okay.
I think you should be good now.
Okay, I think so. Let's see here. I am not finding there it is. Why is it not coming up? Let's see, hold on one second. Just let me get past this little glitch here. There it is. I found it, yay. Let me get started on this first slide. Ah, there I am again. So we already know who I am, but today I am going to talk about a loving approach to dementia care. I am so honored to be here to share this information with you. And I am going to break this into 2 parts, basically. This part 1 is, I'm going to talk about what do I mean by becoming dementia aware. I'm going to share the ultimate toll of caregiving when it comes to dementia care. I'm going to give you a little different perception about what dementia is. We've all heard myths and misperceptions, and so I'm going to break some of those myths today. And then I want to talk about understanding why loss of brain function manifests into changes of behavior. And then in part 2, we're going to work on some ways that we can manage that. So what does it mean to become dementia aware? Well, a dementia aware individual, and this takes a process, a lot of education, and some of you are in the trenches just being educated day by day, just having the experience of caring for a loved one or a professional who has any cause of dementia symptoms. But a dementia-aware individual practices proven loving approach strategies so that you can grow a deeper understanding of dementia. And you're going to work on breaking some old habits. These old habits that work really well when you're communicating with somebody who has a healthy brain, they don't always work so well for somebody who has this loss of brain function and dementia symptoms. And we're going to talk about how you have to change as that caregiver. You have to change your care approach and communication techniques and how we can do that to better connect. And then we're going to utilize these fundamental tools to better understand the world through the eyes of someone who has dementia symptoms. But first, I want to start by telling a little story. I want to tell you the story of Peggy. So many years ago, when Peggy was only 17, she was asked to go to her little town square dance. Now, she was isolated in this little farming town in a region where there was many farming towns. And so once a month, all of these little towns would get together and have a social event, a square dance, a good old-fashioned hoedown. And Peggy's little town would host these every month. And Peggy was a very shy girl. She was a shy 17-year-old who felt awkward in social situations like these square dances, so she wasn't really looking forward to it, but her girlfriends insisted that she get ready. They got her all gussied up, and they pushed her into the square dance hall on that particular night. And there happened to be a guest square dance caller there, a young man by the name of Jack. Now, Peggy took one look at Jack, turned to her girlfriends and said, "Oh my goodness, that man is so handsome. I'm going to marry that man." And they laughed at her and said, "You're too shy. You won't even introduce yourself." But Peggy did. She marched up and she introduced herself to Jack. And they were seen talking and flirting throughout the whole evening. Before the end of that square dance that night, Jack asked Peggy out on their first date. They began to date over the next year. They fell madly in love. So on Peggy's 18th birthday, they eloped. Now, they had a long, wonderful, magical life together. They raised 5 healthy children, and Peggy so loved raising babies and children that she began to invite foster children into her home as well. And by the time it was all said and done, she not only raised her own 5 healthy children, she raised over 20 foster children, and every one of them had special care needs. And she was that kind of person, that true caregiver at heart, that would figure out a way to give appropriate care no matter what the need. Now, she successfully her and Jack raised all of these children. And as they began to leave home as young adults, Jack and Peggy began to really get excited about the dream lifestyle of retirement that they had talked about all their married life. And when that last adult child left the home, Jack and Peggy sold their house, bought an RV, and began to travel all over. That had always been their dream, and they lived that retirement dream successfully for quite a few years. However, they were both getting up there in age. So shortly after they hit the road, Jack began to have some health challenges. And Peggy just, as always, she just took care of whatever came along. He had macular degeneration, so she took over the driving. But Jack also began to show signs and symptoms of dementia. And this was concerning to Peggy because she had seen many of her friends and neighbors and people that she knew, even other family members that had to deal with the dementia care journey. And she knew it was long and difficult and arduous. So as Jack continued to decline and show more and more dementia symptoms, Peggy gathered him up, took him to their family physician, and they found that they got the devastating diagnosis that Jack indeed had Alzheimer's as the cause of his dementia symptoms. Peggy knew there was no recovery, there was no treatment, that she was just going to have to step back into that role 100% of being a caregiver and take care of her beloved spouse. So they sold their beloved little home on wheels. They bought a little house in a small town next to some friends of theirs. And Peggy stepped back into that role of caring for someone, this time her beloved, who had a progressive cause of dementia symptoms, Alzheimer's. Now, at first, because she was that true caregiver at heart, she threw herself into it 100%, and she was doing okay. But as he continued to decline, Peggy began to struggle taking care of Jack. Some of his symptoms were becoming quite unmanageable. And so she decided to reach out for some emotional support. Now, all her family's long distance. There's nobody that can really come give her physical help, but she's decided she's going to start having some phone calls and just get some, just that emotional support that she felt she was needing. So she began to have calls with her family, talking about her challenges. She began to explain that now Jack was wandering. And so she couldn't take her eyes off of him for a minute, or he was out the door and down the road. She even had to call the police a couple times and ask them to come and fetch him and bring him home. He wasn't sleeping at night. He was up and down. And of course, he needed that 24-hour eyes-on supervision. So Peggy was literally sleeping with one eye open, and she was exhausted. And sometimes he was not processing normally, and she would enter the room and he did not recognize her as his beloved wife of all those years. And he would become quite agitated, believing she was a stranger in their own home. As she was sharing this with the rather surprised family members, they said, "Oh my gosh, we didn't know that it was that much of a challenge. Why don't you get some help in there?" And she shared with them, there's no dementia-aware trained help here. This is a little small town. Most of the residents are older as well. I can't really ask them for any help. They have their own issues. There's no memory care. There's no senior services, really. There's not really anybody to help me. And even when I take Jack to the doctor, it's difficult to get him to the doctor. He resists. And then once I get him there, the doctor comes in for 10 or 15 minutes, listens to his heart, takes his blood pressure, tells me he has dementia, which I already know, and sends us home with no resources, no strategies. I'm really on my own. So the family said, "Well, we'll come help you. We'll leave our careers, our education. If we have new families, we'll come help you." And she would always stop them. No, 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 no. I'm a caregiver at heart. I promised you that Jack and I would take care of each other. We're not going to run influence in your life now. When we launched you out there, we said we would take care of each other. No, 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 no. I can take care of this. If I need more help, I'll alert you. Unfortunately, after these phone calls became more and more, and the family could hear that she was struggling, but they believed her when she said she could manage it. One night they were home alone, Jack and Peggy had made Jack a wonderful dinner. But as she sat down to have dinner with Jack, Peggy suffered a massive heart attack. Now, Jack's dementia was so far advanced, he did not recognize that she needed emergency help. In his confusion, he kind of wandered outside and said something disorienting to a passing neighbor that Peggy was tired. She was sleeping on the floor. So unfortunately, by the time help arrived, Peggy was gone. Peggy was my mother. I had to learn, feet to the fire, the impact that dementia care can have on that caregiver. And it's not just my mother. The statistics show that this is the hardest role to step into. It's 3 times harder than being a caregiver for somebody who has a physical challenge. And 68% of the time, if that caregiver does not ask for help, does not get the kind of help that will help them across the finish line, what I call a dementia care marathon, 68% of the time, especially if it is a same age spouse, they will get sick and often pass before the loved one they are caring for with dementia symptoms. And of course, this story hits right into my own heart. I had to learn the hard way how challenging this was and how caregivers often so selflessly sacrifice their own well-being on this arduous dementia care road. So part of becoming dementia aware is learning how important you are as the caregiver and taking time for yourself, making sure that you are asking for help and making sure that you have a clear understanding about what dementia is so that then I can help you to connect in a very different way that will also offer you some relief from some of these challenges that you are experiencing. Now, everybody's different. Everybody that is a caregiver has a different perspective, different timelines, different experiences that they're sharing. And everyone who has dementia symptoms has different loss, different kinds of dementia symptoms, different causes of dementia. So we have to learn to customize, to take this information and make it our own, to fit it into each of our own personal situations. But I have taken the last 25 years and really studied about how I can give golden threads of truth, golden threads of familiarity, golden threads of strategies that can help you on this journey. So the first thing we're going to talk about is I'm going to change your perception about what dementia is here for a minute. When I ask, especially when I'm able to do these presentations in person and I can interact, when I ask the question, what is dementia? I hear many different things, but one of the things that I hear most often is dementia is memory loss. I want to tell you that that is actually a myth. And we're going to dig a little deeper in here so that you can understand what I'm saying, but it is much more than just memory loss. And dementia is also not a disease. It's not even an illness. It is not definitely a diagnosis. Dementia is a list of symptoms, and there has to be a cause. So we don't just get dementia symptoms because we're getting older. So let me explain, first of all, about what I mean by symptoms. So all of you that are listening today, at one time or another, you've experienced the symptom of pain, right? So I think that you will agree with me that something has to cause you to have pain. Pain is not a diagnosis. Pain is a symptom, and pain is the symptom that tells us that something's wrong. Maybe you've had an injury or something has happened where you are experiencing pain because there's something wrong in your joint, or something has happened that's not, your body's not functioning the same. You have that injury, that something going on. And so that pain is telling you, hey, something's wrong. So imagine with me. Imagine that this morning you woke up and you had horrible pain in your shoulder. Now, when you went to bed last night, you were fine, but you woke up with this horrible pain and you can hardly get out of bed. When you move your arm, you're just in excruciating pain. So you decide you need to go to your doctor. And your expectation is the doctor's going to do a proper examination, ask you questions, and hopefully find out what is causing the pain. That's the diagnosis, whatever's causing that symptom of pain. And hopefully that diagnosis can be treated successfully so that you and your doctor can take care of that pain. But imagine you're standing in front of the doctor and you describe the pain to the doctor to help. Oh, you know, it's right here and it started this morning. When I move my arm this way or that way, it's a sharp pain that radiates down my arm. So you explain the symptom. But instead of the doctor taking the next step, the doctor smiles at you and says, well, yes, you have pain, and writes pain as the diagnosis on your medical chart and sends you home. That's going to be a little frustrating because that doesn't meet your expectation of the doctor helping you. The doctor's not even helping you manage the symptom of pain with some kind of medication or heat or ice or anything like that. So now let's go into the whole dementia care arena. And let's imagine again, something a little bit different. Imagine that I am a family caregiver. I'm a daughter and I live in a little small town, and imagine 2 doors down, my 97-year-old mom lives in the house where she raised me and my siblings. She lived there with my dad until he passed away a few years ago. And now she's living there alone. And up until recently, she's been doing okay with that. She does require a little bit of assistance, and I'm really close by, but that assistance is getting to be more and more and more. So I'm getting a little concerned because I can see her really declining, really showing more and more dementia symptoms. and she's needing me more often. For example, she's really frightened at night, and she used to be able to stay all night by herself and she was fine. I was just right down just a couple of houses away, but now she really requires me to be there at night, because when she gets up at night, she's very, very disoriented, and she can no longer find her way to the bathroom. That familiar path that she had in the past made anytime she needed to over the years, but now she just can't do that. She can't come out of her front door, turn right, go 2 houses down. She's done that many, many times, but she just can't process that pathway anymore. She can't go to a restaurant because it's just too overstimulating. She can't process the menu. It's too noisy. It's just really anxiety invoking. So I decide, she is declining. I'm going to get her to the doctor. I go to the doctor. I explain these symptoms to the doctor, just like I just did for you. But instead of going to the next level, this particular doctor smiles at me and says, well, your mom has dementia. As a dementia-aware individual, our next statement should be, well, thank you. I can see that mom is experiencing dementia symptoms, but dementia is not a diagnosis. So what I'd like to do is work with you, Mr. or Mrs. Physician, to figure out what is causing it. Now, this is not an easy task. This is rather daunting for the medical community, and it's really a best guess diagnosis, because most can't be confirmed diagnosis until after that person passes away and there's an autopsy. But they can get close to these different causes by looking at the different progression of the different symptoms. And there's thousands of different symptoms, not just memory loss, and taking that information, and then they can get to that cause. Something has to cause this person to have dementia symptoms, and that particular cause has gotten into their brain and is robbing them of brain function, with the learned brain function first. And there's over 100 different causes. Just because there's somebody is expressing or presenting dementia symptoms on any level, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is caused by Alzheimer's, although Alzheimer's is the leading cause. So statistics say it's more likely to be the cause. But there are other brain illnesses and diseases along with Alzheimer's that cause this kind of loss that gets expressed in all these different dementia symptoms. There's also brain injury, brain trauma, vascular dementia that causes loss as well, such as a stroke or such as a severe head injury or trauma. That can also cause loss of brain function, but in a different way than the brain illness or disease. And brain illnesses or diseases that cause this loss of brain function, such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or Lewy body or Huntington's disease or Pick's disease, they are permanent loss and progressive loss, which means it continues to get worse over time. They lose more and more. And it's permanent loss, even with a stroke. However, stroke's not considered to be progressive, because there are ways to treat. Once you've had a stroke, there are ways to treat that brain so that the medical community can keep you from having more and more strokes, or at least try to prevent that from happening. Whereas the brain illness and brain disease, there's no stopping it. There's no slowing it down. There's no kind of medication that is going to treat that or help you recover. And then there's also temporary dementia symptoms caused by perhaps an ongoing infection, or certain medications can cause that to happen. But that is a different category in itself, because those can be treated, and the brain illness and brain disease cannot. There's no way that we can stop it, fix it, or change it. But the good news, if there's any in this, is the fact that caregivers can learn to manage it, to come alongside that person and help them with their loss and help them with their abilities, and also communicate in a very different way that helps to connect and engage and provide a quality of life. Now there's a little story I want to tell you about if we were to imagine that if we could see inside of our brain, if we could see that there was a door and we could open that up in our forehead and see our brain, instead of seeing the actual brain, let's imagine that all of our healthy brains look like a solid piece of cheddar cheese. And that we can still make cheese. We need cheese to do anything. We access cheese to do anything as humans. We access it to think and make decisions and hear and see and talk. And so we've been building this cheese. We've got this healthy chunk of cheddar cheese. And so we are really healthy humans living our quality of life, accessing cheese because we have it. What happens with someone who has dementia symptoms is basically, the way I want you to think about this or visualize it is a dirty rat has gotten into their cheese. That dirty rat is this cause that I'm talking about. And it could be Mr. Alzheimer's. 60% of the time it's estimated Alzheimer's is the cause of this loss. But it could be Parkinson's, or it could be Lewy body, or any of these other 100 causes. And once that dirty rat is in there, and we're not real sure how it gets there, once it's in there, it's a hungry dirty rat, runs around that healthy piece of cheddar cheese, grabs greedy bites of cheese, and basically leaves holes. And with it, it takes this learned brain function that we're going to talk about. So over time, and that even is very personal because it can be a very long period of time. It can be a shorter period of time. Everybody progresses in this disease process a little bit more individually, but over time, that dirty rat has taken away many brain functions in many different places in the brain. And so that person, when they go to access that brain function that they've been accessing just to make sense of all this information around them in the world, it's not always there for them to access. They hit a hole. And so they're challenged with making sense of whatever piece of data is coming at them because they no longer have that ability to think, to understand, and to process. And then to complicate it even more, often there is a dementia symptom that many people experience about 95% of the time. It's called anesignosia, and they don't feel any different. Although we can see their dementia symptoms, they don't see that loss. They tend to think there's really nothing wrong with them. And there's a lot of reasons why this happens, but one of the big reasons is that they get a hole in the portion of their cheese that would even be able to think about or know or understand that they have impairments. And so they keep thinking that they are functioning at the same level as they always have. And so they refuse care. And they get very defensive and resistive because they believe they are normal. And when they go to access that cheese and it's not there, they don't feel any different. There's no pain involved in that. So they still want to believe, and also because this is horrific and painful emotionally, they want to believe that they are still normal, and they will continue to try and prove that to you, even though over and over again, that loss raises its ugly head. So let's talk about what does that loss mean? Because at first, the loss is learned brain function, and then it moves to basic brain function. So let me talk a little bit about the difference. When an infant comes to this world, and they have a healthy brain, they come with basic brain function. For example, an infant can actually see, they see the world, but they have to learn the learned brain function of accessing and processing and understanding and making sense of what they see. So they learn what mommy's face looks like. They learn what daddy's face looks like and the differences. And they also, when they're learning to understand what it is they're seeing and what it means to them, they also learn how this information makes them feel. And they learn and they store that information and they access it. And when they access that physical vision, they also access how that makes them feel. For example, how does it make them feel when mommy is right there and they can see her face? Does it make them feel loved and safe and secure? Of course, most of the time, that's what they're getting when they can see mommy's face. How does it make them feel when they can't see mommy's face? When there is no one there with them? Do they feel frightened and abandoned and lonely, perhaps? So all of those feelings are attached to what they're seeing, how they're making sense of it in each situation, in each of their experiences. And they store that and they access it over and over and over again. Now, when an infant comes to this world, they can hear. They hear sounds, they hear voices, they hear words. And just like what your brain is doing right now, when a sound, such as my words, my sentences, my whole presentation here, when it comes out of my mouth, it doesn't even come out as words. I form sound waves that come across and hit your ear, and then your ear goes to work to make sense of those sound waves, which is so interesting because think about how complex that is. If I spoke several different languages, the sound waves would be slightly different. But if you understood several different languages, your brain would be able to process all of that information. It's really quite astounding, all that we learn throughout a lifetime that complements this basic brain function. So right now you are hearing my words, hearing my presentation. You're seeing perhaps my little box on the screen and seeing my face and seeing my facial expressions. And it's all about how this is making you feel. So that is also attached, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. That's attached to what I'm saying, what you're hearing, how you're finding meaning. And hopefully this is empowering you, giving you more confidence. You know, some light bulbs are going off. That's helping you to better understand each individual situation. Now on the screen, I also want to talk about, let me back up one more minute. I also want to talk about infants. When they come to this world, they can move their arms and their legs and their head. They have that healthy basic brain function of movement, but over time, they also have to learn specific learned brain function, practice that, process that, get better at balance and coordination. That's how they learn to crawl. That's how they learn to stand and to walk and to run. And every time you get out of a chair as an adult, you utilize that learned brain function, your balance and coordination, to safely get out of a chair and move across the room. And all of this, once again, is making you feel safe and secure and confident to walk, to get out of your chair. And all of that is really processed and stored and practiced over the years, and it's stored in certain parts of your brain. So you access that over and over and over again without even having to think about it, so that you can see and hear and move and think and make decisions and recognize faces and think about names and think about past events and memories and how that made you feel. All of that is stored in your brain. And as we age, you can see on the screen, on one side is a healthy brain that's all full and fluffy. And in that healthy brain is brain matter, brain cells, and this information stored in those brain cells, in that brain matter, in that brain, in the different departments so that we can access it. Now, on the other side, you see a brain that has been ravaged by severe Alzheimer's disease. And you can see that there's holes and pieces of the brain that is missing. And it's not just memory, it's all over that brain. It affects the ability to access vision and hearing and understanding and thinking and processing and moving. And so what happens is we lose that learned brain function when we have one of these causes, such as Alzheimer's disease. And then eventually, because For example, Alzheimer's disease is a terminal illness. Eventually, it will get to that basic brain function, and that keeps that person from accessing breathing and blood pressure and heartbeat and all of that. So what starts first in the loss process is the learned brain function that we've learned over the years. And it starts with our most current learning, and it starts to go on rewind. So when we experience this loss, the way we show that to the world is that we have these dementia symptoms. We have dementia symptoms of, for example, of falling, because we've lost that balance and that coordination. And often I hear from families, Laura, you're right. Because my dad, he was such an athlete. He was so coordinated. He was always just hiking and biking and moving and had great coordination. But you know what? He started to get just clumsy. And I didn't recognize that early as dementia symptoms because I was busy waiting for him to have memory loss. And memory loss can come quite a bit later, after some of this other learned brain function has really begun to show up years before. So that's why it's so important to have this dementia awareness, to have this understanding of what is going on and what kinds of loss we're seeing, because we're going to see loss of language, loss of ability to process words. Now, and it also is connected to how that's going to make us feel. So how would you feel, all of you who came on today, and I thank you for being here, and you're going to listen to me give this presentation. I'm going to raise your dementia awareness. And instead of giving this information the way I'm giving it to you, I start and give the whole presentation like this, blah, 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 blah. Now you hear it, but can you make sense of that? Does that have meaning for you? Can you understand that and want to access it later? And of course, it would make you feel frustrated, and you'd probably be thinking, who's this crazy lady and why is she continuing to do this? I don't understand. And you'd probably leave the webinar. So what I want you to understand is the world becomes blah, 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 blah. And it is up to us as the caregivers to understand that this is going on, that their ability to process language and to make intelligent choices and decisions and process the world around them, their brain is trying to make sense. But basically, what has happened is their brain is broken. Their thinker is broken in so many different ways. Now, they'll fool you because they can still process. They lose bits at a time and still have brain function. But the important part that I want you to recognize, because this is really a gateway for us to understand and to help them and for them to trust us, is to understand that the feelings and emotions that they come to this world with, those remain. But they lose the ability to even process how they're feeling, or to really experience it and then share how they're feeling. They feel and react raw emotion because they've lost the ability to really cope with and manage and process and think about and make sense of how they're feeling, but the feelings still remain. For example, they might access a memory. They might access that memory and how that memory makes them feel, but they can't make sense of it in time or in place. And so they may access a memory of their mother who passed away years ago, but they still get that feeling of wanting to be near her and missing her. So they can't access why she's not there. So what happens is we, as dementia-aware individuals, need to keep in mind that we can't stop, fix, or change this loss. We can't stop, fix, or change these challenges. We can't stop, fix, or change how they feel in the moment. But what we can do is join them and help them feel loved, safe, secure, and valued by managing it instead of trying to fix it. So what we do as dementia-aware individuals is we learn to think for someone who has a broken thinker. And there's different ways to do this, but I'm going to talk about the most important strategies now that you understand what's going on here. The most important strategies to help that person who has this broken thinker, who has these challenges. So I want to ask you to stop asking questions and giving options. Now that's something we have learned to do to someone with a healthy brain, and it works. All throughout your life, you've been having conversations and communication and engaging and connecting by asking questions. But now I'm going to ask you to throw away that habit, because it no longer works for somebody who has a broken thinker. And this is why. Because when you ask someone a question, you ask them to think of a response. So what you're doing is you're asking someone who has these dementia symptoms and this loss of brain function, and this gets worse over time. So in the beginning of this journey, they may be able to answer questions, but as this broken thinker becomes more and more broken, it gets more and more challenging for them to answer a question. Even a simple question like, how are you today? Or what did you have for lunch? Because they have to think of the question and then think of a response. And because they can't do that, it makes them anxious. It makes them defensive. It makes them not trust you. They feel put upon. They feel less than, because they can't come up with that answer. And there's shame and guilt and anxiety and fright. So instead, I ask you to start practicing using positive action statements. Now, this is not easy because I want you to think about how often you ask questions, but I also want you to really look back and see how often you get a positive response. When you ask someone who has these kinds of challenges a question, how do they often respond? Generally speaking, it's very negative. So this takes a little practice, and it's counterintuitive to how you've always communicated with an adult, like I said. So I practice this all the time, and still I'll get tripped up every once in a while and ask a question. But I've learned that just doesn't work. I've learned it is much more successful, better positive care outcomes when I take the time to think for them. So I take a deep breath, I smile, I slow down and relax. I join their feelings. We're going to talk about that in a minute, because the feelings remain. I pause and I give them time to process, and then I use positive action statements. So let's change these following common questions into positive action statements. This can be kind of a practice session. I want you to start working with these. So instead of how are you today, how about if you, whenever you approach the person you are caring for, you say, oh, you look great today, or I'm so glad to see you, or you have such a beautiful smile, or that's a wonderful color on you. Instead of are you hungry, how about if we use, I bet you're a little hungry. I love it when we have lunch together. Come on, let's go. Come on, positive action. Let's go together. Instead of can I help you with a shower, this is a really tricky one. I do a whole training on this resistance to showers and bathing, but just a simple, let's get cleaned up. Aunt Martha's coming this afternoon. Let's go make your hair look great. Let's just get cleaned up a little bit. Instead of saying, can I help you? Or can you take a shower? Or will you take a shower? Let's join them instead with a positive action. Come on, let's get this done. Instead of how are you feeling, I like to say, gosh, I can only imagine how that makes you feel. So I join them in their feeling, because if we ask them how they're feeling, they often can't even express that. The feelings are still there. Why are you doing that? That's so judgmental, and you will get resistance to that. Instead, if they are doing something that you feel is inappropriate or is not working well for you as the caregiver, instead of, why are you doing that? Instead, it's, come over here. I want to show you something. Or, I love it when we take a walk together. Come on. Or, it's beautiful. Let's take a drive. Something more positive. And what do you want to eat? Not, do you want chicken or fish? You're asking them to think. Instead, I made your favorite fried chicken. I can't wait for us to share it together. So it's that approach that will help buy you some time and keep that person from being resistant, negative, just defensive. And that gives you a little more time. Especially if you join their feelings first, this will help them to trust you. So instead of saying, come on, let's go for a walk. Hey, I was just thinking about taking a walk with you. It looks like you'd really enjoy that. Come on. Instead of saying, are you hungry? It's, it's late. We haven't eaten yet. I know I'm hungry. Come on, let's eat together. So allowing them to feel, giving them that permission to feel, joining them, instead of saying, would you like to come listen to some music? You could say, all your friends are waiting down in the common area. Come on, let's go join them for music. I made your favorite fried chicken. Let's eat together. I always enjoy lunch more when we eat together. Come sit and have dinner with me. I always enjoy the music when we go together. You're enjoying it with them. You're joining in those feelings. If they're heading for the door, you don't want to say, you can't go out that door. Instead, you want to say, oh, it looks like you're wanting to take a walk. Let's get your sweater so you won't be cold. I love it when we walk together. Or, I always enjoy helping you. Thank you for letting me be here to help you. We keep it simple, clear, and to the point, and we utilize actions. So we want to hold out our hand. Come with me. It's show and tell. Instead of saying, where's your walker? You're going to fall if you don't use it. Here's your walker. It just keeps you stable and safe. Hold out your hand, bring them their walker, take their arm. It's show and tell, not just words. Think for them. I used to use Maya Angelou's quote because it really makes sense. And it does make sense for someone who has a healthy brain. We've all experienced this. People will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you make them feel. Those feelings, even with a healthy brain, they're there. They're right on the surface. But we can talk ourselves off the ledge. We can talk to somebody about how they're feeling. We can even change somebody's feelings when we have the opportunity to talk to them if they have a healthy brain and can listen and go with us with that verbal instruction. But let's make this quote dementia aware, because we're not working with people that have a healthy brain and are able to process. We're working with people who have brain function loss. And a lot of times most of the time, it has affected their ability to process language and all the pieces of data that come to them, what they hear and what they see. So someone with dementia symptoms may not process what you say. They're not going to process in that normal way like they used to. They're not going to process what you are doing or what you're asking them to do in the normal way. It does not get into that processing portion of the brain, which is not processing the same. It's hard for them to make sense of what you're saying and what you're doing. However, whatever you say and do will always make them feel. So we don't want them to feel lost or confused or unsure or unclear or perplexed or disoriented or bewildered. We want them to, through our actions and our words and our care approach and our positive actions, we want them to feel loved, safe, secure, and valued as often as possible. However, keep in mind, this does not stop behaviors. This does not stop the symptoms. What it does is it helps you to manage them. So this method Okay, so that person continues to head for the door and say they want to go home. This method, you're going to come alongside them and say, oh, home's a great place. I love it when you tell me about your home. Come sit over here and tell me about that. Come walk with me. I love it when we walk outside, beautiful outside. Let's go walk outside. I love that when we can spend time together. What's going to happen 15 minutes later? We didn't stop those feelings from coming up for them wanting to feel like they're home. And it's not the place, it's the feelings, by the way. So what's going to happen 15 minutes later? When it works, we do it again and we repeat. What does happen is it keeps them more often in a calm place where their brain is not overfiring or overstimulating, and they're feeling all of these feelings just because life is just hitting them with too much data that their brain can't process. It stretches out that time and they begin to have more meaningful moments. Now, I said moments. I didn't say hours, and I didn't say days, but you will experience this feeling of relief. They will experience more often feelings of love and safety and comfort and value because you are being proactive, utilizing these strategies and thinking for them. It is a process. It takes practice. I practice this every day. I learn something new every day about different care approach strategies and different ways to help that caregiver customize this. But these basic dementia-aware strategies, I want you to start keeping in mind. I want you to start practicing this. No questions or options. Join their feelings. Use positive action statements. Stay calm, confident, patient, and present with them in the moment. They can only process the moment, not what happened right before, not what is going to happen in the next moment. And know that you cannot stop it, fix it, or change the symptoms, behaviors, or decline, and help them to feel loved, safe, secure, and valued as often as you can. So let's talk a little bit if we have some questions, some thoughts, some comments. And so, Erin, if you want to, I could stop the share here, or Denny, if you want to talk about any questions maybe that we have, or comments, or anything that we can discuss.
Okay, I have a couple of questions from the audience. Why do some people suffering from dementia have violent personality changes?
Often those violent personality changes are exacerbated by expectations of us wanting them to think. So that's not always true. There can be some medical reasons, and there could be some mental health reasons in the background that are also exacerbating the dementia symptoms. But often when I see very extreme behaviors, it is someone's been really poking that bear. Someone's been really asking a lot of questions or expecting them to think. And we do that. We don't intentionally do that. But if we're constantly asking that brain to think, and they have layer upon layer of anxiety, by the time the afternoon or evening comes and they call this sundowning, that brain is just so overworked, and they are so overly anxious because they have this loss, that we will see more extreme behaviors. And I also get calls from, because I train staff in memory care, I get calls and they'll say, well, this particular resident hit the caregiver. And I'll say, well, what question did the caregiver ask right before that? And 99% of the time it's, would you like to take a shower? Or why won't you take your shower? Or, something that got them anxious, trying to make them stop it, fix it, or change it.
Oh.
And it scares that person. Whereas there are strategies where we can, I've entered the lion's den and I've never to this point been bitten. However, once they get to such an exasperated state, such a high level, it's accelerated to a high level of extreme anxiety, sometimes we have to back up a little bit and let them calm down. And sometimes we need to ask for some help from maybe a family member or a different caregiver. But I always want you to journal what happened right before then. How can we be more proactive to keep this from accelerating to this point? How can I change? Because I can't stop, fix, or change them.
Oh, that's really okay. Another question. Why do some people with dementia seem to get into certain loops and keep saying the same thing over and over again? Like sometimes some people with dementia will keep talking about what they did 35 years ago, or they'll kind of get lost in that kind of thing, and that's where they are. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. And that's what I mean by saying it's not about memory loss, because what you're explaining is that they're accessing a memory, right? But they're in this loop because it's the only memory that they're able to somewhat access in their loss. And then it makes them feel a certain way, but they can't make sense of it. So have you ever woken up from a nightmare, and that nightmare still, you're still feeling that fear, and it takes a minute for that to go away? Well, those feelings, when they access a memory, those feelings come along, but they can't make sense of why they're feeling this so strong, like it's happening right now. So the other thing is if they keep going in a loop and asking questions over and over again, what you need to understand is that every time you give them facts and details to think about it, it makes them anxious, and it doesn't help them to feel satisfied with the answer. So instead of answering the question, we talk to their feelings. So where are we going? Often what we want to do is give them the information. Well, we got a doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock. We're going to go get in the car. What did they hear? Blah, 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 blah. So they're frustrated, like, you didn't really tell me. I didn't understand. So they'll ask again, where are we going?
Oh, yeah.
So if you instead talk to their feelings, like, we're going for a car ride. I love it when we get out, when it's so beautiful outside. And then all of a sudden you're at the doctor's office. You're driving along, you're at the doctor's. If you haven't given a lot of information, they might say, do I have a doctor's appointment? Yeah, let's go get this done. Then we'll go have some lunch. Because the less you give them to think about, the less anxious they'll be, the less they'll ask you over and over again, because then they're in those feelings of love, safety, security, and value. And so it's so weird, because you stop answering questions, because the more you answer, the more they'll ask. It's just the strangest thing.
Do you have any time for one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. I noticed that after my mom was in the hospital and away from our family, she noticeably declined. Why did that happen?
Sometimes that's kind of a tricky question, because it depends on the circumstances. But when we move them from a familiar routine, we ask them to think. Even though it's appropriate, or it probably is appropriate, we have to access a higher level of care, we're still asking them to think in every single thing that they're doing. If they're in their particular routine, they're on muscle memory in their brain, and they wake up at a certain time and they have this or that, and they don't have to think about it because that caregiver's thinking for them. Then we move them somewhere, and we're asking that broken brain to think. So it's not that it makes them worse. Often what it is it's showing the holes in the cheese. So if they have function in their home and they're accessing that function, they look like they're just going along, then we move them somewhere, they're hitting holes, and we see how bad it actually is. So it looks like it gets worse, but it's not really, and it is hard on their brain. It's stressful to ask them to think, but just because we're asking them to think doesn't necessarily make it worse, but it certainly points out how bad it actually is.
I get it. Okay, I'm just thrilled. This was great. Occasionally I do fill in. We have an adult day center here. And occasionally I fill in, and this will definitely help me a lot. I remember the first couple of times I attended, I remember feeling very sad and confused and angry about what was, and this was the people I didn't understand, and I just felt so bad for them, and I didn't want to go do this. But I realized that when I just sort of let go, and before I walked through the door, I just went, okay, you're just going to be in their reality now and just go for it. Things went so much better. But yet, boy, we ask them questions all the time, and poor people, they try. So thank you so much for your time. I think I just know the feedback is going to be great. And also the really cool thing about this is because this is recorded, this will be a resource. This basic thing that you have, we can use that now when we have caregivers call or people at the adult day center. We can just send them to this recorded thing. And do you want to talk a little bit about your book? Just kind of give a shout out to your book. So if anybody's interested.
Okay, so here it is. I don't know how well you can see it.
There we go.
A Loving Approach to Dementia Care. It's published by Johns Hopkins University Press. It's now in its 3rd edition. Lots of strategies, lessons learned. And so I'm going to also link up on my website, laurawayman.com, this recording so that anyone can access it either from you, from me, and I'm going to donate a few books to your resource center. So I'll get those to you because I know how much this helps. This is readily available. You can see it on my website, but I want to get this resource to you too. I am so honored to be here today.
Yeah, and if you get a chance, come north.
I would love to.
I think you'll like it.
I would.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before you go, Denny, why don't you talk about the sessions for the rest of the
That's
caregiver
what
education
I'm about
speaker.
to do. Next week, Beth Chapman, an attorney